Oh. All right, Yabosai, good morning. Good morning. It is a great schus Baruch Hashem to be able to continue with Sanhedrin. So we begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for Tafshin Pehei 5785, the Tilson Mishpacha, for dedicating all the Shirim and Drashos this year as a zichus for Besaros Tavos for Am Yisrael. Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves Habalin Tova, the Kalm Mishpacha memory of Amit ben David Levi, Zichron Levracha, brother of Itai Levi, who was killed fighting in Gaza on the first night of Chanukah. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, his precious Neshama will have an aliyah and the family in Nechama. And we thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Michael and Rachel Turniansky, in honor of the birth of their grandson, Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov, born to Yitzi and Jenny Turniansky. Mazel Tov, Michael. And the God Torah. And of course, we dedicate our learning in the schos of the three precious hostages returned to Klal Yisrael yesterday. I'm sure we all saw some of the video clips, which were just so amazing and so overwhelming and so beautiful. But it reminds us that there is still so much more that has to happen, and how we have to redouble our efforts, learn a little harder, daven a little harder, do a little bit more chesed, a little more tzedakah, whatever we can do. And halavai, what yesterday showed us is that it is possible. It is possible to say that there's going to be a happy ending to the story. You know, I always speak about this, just for a moment. You know, in Yiddishkeit, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, writes that Judaism, you know, in the world of literature, it says that there's two different types of stories. There's more than two, but he explains two. There's mythology and there are fairy tales. So in mythology, you know, if you ever read Greek mythology, which I happened to like when I was younger, so, you know, the stories are all very strange. You have the gods who are very human-like, and the gods are always trying to foil the actions and plans of man. Right? And then you have fairy tales. And what happens in fairy tales? Every fairy tale always ends in the same way, and that's how? And everyone lived happily ever after. Rabbi Sachs posits that certainly in Yiddishkeit we don't have mythology, because we don't have HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be more successful than we want our success. And the Moshe was always rooting and advocating and cheering for us. So we don't believe in mythology. But at the same time, in Yiddishkeit, we have no fairy tales. We have no story that ends and everyone lived happily ever after. Like the Torah Kadosh ends, how does the Torah end? The Torah ends with Moshe Rabbeinu's death. All Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to get, all he wanted was to come into Eretz Yisrael. And he's taken from this world just mere steps away from Eretz Yisrael. At the end, on Purim, when we read Megillah Esther, and the Megillah ends, and we're all celebratory and everything, and what happens? The heroine of the story, Esther, is locked in a marriage she did not want to be in, to Achashverosh, living a life that she did not want to be in. Judaism doesn't have an everyone lived happily ever after stories. It's not the way it works, because that's not the essence of life. The essence of life is not and everyone lived happily ever after. The essence of life is everyone the end of the narrative is, and everyone kept on living, growing, and accomplishing. Despite the pain, despite the setback, with all of the broken hearts, we keep on going. So, you know, we see these incredible images of the hostages being returned. And on one hand, there's such a feeling of elation, such a feeling of celebration. And yet at the same time, we cannot forget all of those who are still in captivity, literally in captivity. We can't forget all of the precious soldiers who have given their lives al Kiddush Hashem over the course of the last year. We can't forget October 7th. We can't forget all of the incredible tragedies. So as much as there's like a wave of simcha, it's not an everyone lived happily ever after moment. But we also have to take in the simcha, take in the excitement, but at the same time, as you mentioned before, redouble our efforts to bring every last of our brothers and sisters home. And there is one story that will end, and everyone lived happily ever after. That's Mashiach. That's Geula. And we eagerly await that day. May it come here, Rabbi Aminu. Amen. We'll say with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Lamed Aleph 34. We got a lot to do today. Let's pick up on Lamed Gimel Amud Beis 33b. And we left off, we got to the two dots. Right? Yeah. Good. Dinei mamanas hakol. So let's remember again. So the Mishnah said, Dinei mamanas hakom olam din schus v'chova. Dinei nefashas hakom olam din schus ve'en hakom olam din chova. So when it comes to dinei mamanas, right, monetary law, everyone. Now we'll see what everyone means. Everyone has the ability to go ahead and be malamed schus, to advocate, right, on behalf of the defendant, and malamed chova, and to also go ahead and bring condemning evidence. When it comes to dinei nefashas, when it comes to capital law, so the halacha is like this: Hakom olam din schus. Everyone has the ability to go ahead and bring a schus, right? Everyone has an ability to advocate on behalf of the defendant, but not everyone has the ability to go ahead and be malamid chova, be malamid, or introduce some damning evidence. Let's analyze this. Says the Gemara, hakol. Now I will say, what does hakol mean? Hakol what? Who's hakol? So the Gemara says, Va'afilu edim, even witnesses. Now what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. 3 lines up from the bottom. Hakol afilu edim. Rashi says, She'idu alav yicholin lamid alav rayo shel zechos. So listen to this case. Reuven comes in, right? So now what happens? Reuven comes into Beis Din. I will say, by the way, this is going to be true. This is going to be true whether it is dinei mamanas or dinei nefashas. The halacha is going to be the same, which goes like this. So let's say witnesses come and they introduce evidence, damning evidence against Reuven. Those very same witnesses, Rabbi Yossi says, could then turn around and introduce some type of exonerating evidence for Reuven, which is interesting, right? Even though, again, so in other words, let's say the witnesses found some additional piece of information, or they rethought about rethinking, in other words, retracting testimony is a much more complicated piece. But the idea Rabbi Yossi says is that even those original witnesses could come along, who originally gave the damning evidence, could come along and give some type of exonerating evidence. The Gemara says, Neimamas Nisin, Neimamas is Kriyos Rabbi Yehuda. Say that our Mishnah supports Rabbi Yehuda, or reflects Rabbi Yehuda's position. So the Gemara says, Neimamas Nisin, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, he v'lo Rabbanan. The Sanya, because we learned, Ve'ed echad lo ya'ana benefesh, bein zechus, bein lechova. So remember again, the Pasuk says, Ve'ed echad lo ya'ana benefesh lamos. The Pasuk says, a singular witness should not give testimony that would result in someone being put to death. Now, you say to yourself, the pasuk sounds pretty straightforward, right? That you can't have a singular witness. The problem is elsewhere the Torah already taught us that you can't have a singular witness. So what is this coming to teach us? So the Gemara says, Eid Echad is not believed no matter what. Tanakama says, an Eid Echad has zero credibility. Whether it's l'schos, whether it's l'chova, it doesn't matter. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, or Rabbi Yehuda says no. Ona l'schos vein ona l'chova. Rabbi Yehuda says no. A single witness is believed l'schos. In other words, when a single witness comes along, and a single witness has some positive testimony for the defendant, he is accepted. Rabbi said, interestingly enough, or the way Rabbi Yosef is saying is that what does that mean? What does that mean? In other words, what can the Eid Echad do? So the Gemara is suggesting over here that what it means is that even if one of the original witnesses who gave damning testimony then finds some other exonerating testimony, we accept him. We accept him. Papa says, the Papa says, no. What does it mean when the Mishnah says Hakom olam din schus? It means even one of the students who is in the Beis Din. Rabbi said, now what does that mean? Now this is incredibly important. What this means is as follows. We saw this before, that in Beis Din, they would often have like rows of students who were there in front of the Beis Din themselves. Now that was for two reasons. Number one, best way to train in new judges is how? Train in new judges, right? Let them be there as the Dinei Torah happened. What it also allowed for was a judge pool, right? Should something happen to one of the sitting judges, they were able to pull someone literally from the bench, and add them in. So Papa says, listen to this, that if as the proceedings are going on, one of the students in the courtroom sees some type of exonerating evidence for the defendant, speak up. The Gemara says, my time is Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. What's Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda's logic? So the Gemara says, the pasuk says, Eid Echad lo ya'ana benefesh lamos. An Eid Echad should not testify about a person that they should be put to death. Lamos hu de'ina ona. So you can't go ahead and testify that somebody should be put to death. Aval l'schus ona. But ultimately, again, to exonerate, he absolutely can say something. Rabbi says, now again, What an Eid Echad could actually accomplish is a different discussion, right? So what is he offers some exonerating evidence, and what? Okay, so we'll see him, Yirtzeh Hashem. But the idea is that he's listened to and his testimony is heard. The Rabbanan say no, we don't accept it. The Rabbanan say once a witness gives his testimony, that's it. That's it. So you can't go ahead and then afterwards introduce no test. So if witnesses came along and they gave damning testimony, right? Or I say damning sounds so they gave testimony, but the testimony again reflected poorly on the defendant. So the Rabbanan say for one of the witnesses, they say, oh, you know what? I just thought of something and it's positive. You can't do that. You can't do that. That looks like you're trying to cover your bases, and in the event that you found, I don't know, to be a false witness, to be an Eitzomim, so you can't do that. Once you give your testimony, choose a team, and that's it. Rabbanan, hi lamos my darshibe. So what do the Rabbanan do with the aforementioned pasuk that says Eid Echad lo ya'ana b'nefesh lamos? What do you do with that? So the Gemara says Mukmi le be'echa min talmidim. Oh, so they say again, it refers to one of the talmidim. That again, if one of the students in the court sees some point of exoneration for the defendant, then ultimately, again, they are believed to give that testimony. If one of the students in the court says, I have some way to go ahead and be malamed zchus, to go ahead and find something positive about the defendant, this is one of the witnesses, I'm sorry. One of the witnesses says, so just to frame the case, one of the witnesses who gave indicting testimony, right? Negative testimony about the defendant, then turns around and says, I have some positive testimony. How do we know that ultimately, again, we do not listen to that individual? Talmud Lomar, Eid Echad Lo Yana. No, once you said your piece, you said your piece. There's such a tremendous, not loud enough? Sorry. Oh. Such a tremendous Moshe Haskell, right? In this, which is, witnesses. Once they say something, you're locked in. You must say it's a good Moshe Haskell in life. Imagine, by the way, if we measured every word by this metric, that once I say it, I can't take it back. Once I say I can't take it back. Imagine how much differently our speech would look like, right? How different our interactions would look if you realize that once it came out, cannot change, right? The Gemara says, once you say it, you can't retract it, you can't reframe it, you can't retool it, you can't reword it. I think how different, again, our speech would look. Incredible. So the Gemara says, how do you know if halacha l'maisa again, if one of the students in the Beis Din, right, the court proceeding is going on, and one of the students in the Beis Din says that halacha l'maisa again, I have some indicting testimony to go ahead and give. In that case, we don't listen to the students. So the only time we listen to the students is when they have something positive to say. If they have something negative to say, we're not going to listen to them. Talmud Lomar, Echad lo ya'na b'nefesh lamos. Incredible. So we'll say, so a lot of things come out of here. So first of all, again, this idea that at least according to Rabbi Yossi, even the witnesses who previously gave negative testimony, if they find something positive, have the ability to go ahead and introduce that into the court proceedings. Rabbanan disagree with that, but everyone seems to agree that the students sitting in the court, if they see some point that could be helpful to the defendant, are believed to introduce that. Incredible. Okay, let's go back there. Dinei nefashos hamalami. So this is the next part of the Mishnah. Excuse me. The Mishnah said, Dinei nefashos, according to the Mishnah, hamalamed chova malamed zchus, aval hamalamed zchus ein yochel lachzor ulalamed chova. So the way it works in capital cases is that if you go ahead and you introduce, let's say malamed chova, so witnesses go ahead, or court goes ahead and wants to find the person guilty, they could change their mind and find the person innocent, argue for his innocence. Conversely, if they argued for his innocence, they can't change their mind and go ahead and argue for their guilt. I will say, I just want to point out, I was thinking about this a little bit yesterday. When you see this, on one hand, it sounds so beautiful. Beis Din doesn't want to put someone to death. On the other hand, it doesn't sound like the way a legal system is supposed to work. Like, in other words, you're tying the court's hands over here in capital cases, right? So just understand, the halacha works with a basic premise, which is, human judgment is never perfect. Human judgment is never perfect, right? So in other words, there's this understanding, what I think one of the key phrases to always keep in mind is the Gemara says, Ein l'dayin ladon ela ma she'ein of rose. A judge could only judge based on what his eyes see. And I will say, and again, witnesses, even when we're talking about truthful witnesses, when witnesses give testimony, they're giving over the truth. What is that truth based on? What is that truth based on? Right? The way they perceive truth. Let's say we all perceive truth in different ways. So if you think about this, every single form of human judgment, right? So the witnesses are presenting truth based on the way they perceive it and see it. The judges are interpreting facts based on the way they perceive it and they see it. So if you think about it, from actual truth, objective truth, is filtered through witnesses' truth. Again, everybody's good people. Witnesses' truth, judges' truth, and now we arrive at a verdict, which means it's possible that you are at least two steps removed from what actual reality is. So in monetary cases, let's play this out. What's the worst case scenario? Hey, let's go through this. What's the worst case scenario? Money ends up in the wrong hands. Here's the great news. The Ribono Shel Olam could move money, right? That's not a problem. That's easy. That's easy. Okay, so basically put money in the wrong hands with all the best intentions, no problem. The Ribono Shel Olam could go ahead and, I was going to say launder, but that's the wrong word, right? He could go ahead. There's a makar for it, right? And so again, he can move the money. Capital cases is much different. Right, so Beis takes a life, again, even with all the true, quote-unquote, true facts, that is a pretty irreversible course of action. So essentially, I both say this reticence to put someone to death is based on this recognition that human judgment, I'm not going to use the word is inherently flawed, but it's inherently limited. So that's what's driving this. We are very, very reticent to have a Beis Din put someone to death. So that's why, again, so you have this idea, once a Beis Din was deliberating and they were seeing the positive, they were seeing exoneration, they can't change their mind. So let's analyze this. Says the Gemara. So Amarav, Lo Shanel B'Shas Maso Matan. When is this true that they can't reverse course, Beis Din can't reverse course? That's when they're arguing the facts, right? In other words, when they're deliberating the case, if there are dayanim, right, if the Beis Din feels that there's room for exoneration, stay that course, and keep analyzing those facts. Don't change course. Aval B'Shas Gemar Din, but at the time that the verdict is going to be delivered, right? The Gemara says, Malamed Zechus Chomin Malamed Chovas. This is fascinating. At the time of the verdict, the assumption is at the time of the verdict, you've really worked this through. So after you've worked it through and you are ready to exonerate, and now you feel that there are grounds to implicate, you could change your mind, because then we assume you've gone through the entire process. I would say it's so counterintuitive. I would have thought just the opposite. During Maso Matan, if you want to change your mind before a verdict has been delivered, before a verdict is reached in your mind, you could flip flop. You could change your mind. Right at the time of the verdict, you can't change your mind. Gemara says no. We want to. If the Beis Din sees room to exonerate, see that process through. Go through the Maso Matan. Okay, you get to the time of the verdict, and now you're ready to deliver a verdict. You see the other side. You can still change your mind. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Meisvei lemachras mashkimin ubain. So listen to this. So the Bryce says as follows. This is a capital case. So what happens? Lemacharas, the next morning. Now what does next morning mean? So Beis Din has deliberated. Now remember, so we saw this before. On capital cases, verdict is never delivered that same day. Beis Din has to sleep on the verdict, and the verdict is delivered the next day. So therefore, the Brisa says as follows: L'macharas, the next day. So let's say again, Beis Din sat in session on Sunday. Now again, they're sleeping on it. So it comes Monday morning. L'macharas, mashkimin uboin. The next morning they come back to the Beis Din. So what happens? Hamazaka, Omrani Mizaka. So the one who wants to exonerate says, I'm exonerating. Mizaka ani bimkomi, and I stand in my place. I'm standing my ground. Hamachayiv Omrani Machayiv, Umachayiv ani bimkomi. Right? The Machayiv says that ultimately again I want to find them guilty, and I'm standing my ground. Hamalamid Chov Hamalamid Schos. So again, we'll say the one who wanted to find him guilty could change his mind. Aval Hamalamid Schos in Yochal Achshar Lamid Chova. But the one ultimately who wanted to exonerate can't change his mind. This is talking about what? This is talking about the verdict. And what do you see from here? What do you see from this brisa? That at the time of the verdict, you can't change your mind. So what's going on over here? And using that same logic, l'macharas masa umatan mi leka. Now again, I will say for the next morning. Ultimately, again, so what fahalamachras gimardinu ulatamech ulamachras maso matan mi leka. But even the next morning, we'll say, even when they get up in the next morning, okay, I understand they can't deliver the verdict until the next morning. But who's to say there's not some back and forth the next morning? Maybe there is still some more back and forth. Because Jewish Gemara says, Kikatani, Bishas Maso Matan. You're right, this price is actually talking about over the time of the verdict, but rather again, it's talking about, again, the time of the back and forth. So supporting what Rav said before, that during the Maso Matan, no one could change their mind. Why? I will say it's very important. What the Gemara is saying is like this: if you're going to choose an approach, and you're going to choose a mahalach, and you're going to choose an opinion, stick with it and see it through. That doesn't preclude you changing your mind, but be a well thought out individual. Right? You see this all the time, that people we change our ideas, we change our hashkafas, we change our approaches, because we're not really well thought out. The Gemara is saying, during Shas Maso Matan, be thought out. Think through what you want to hold, and then arrive at a decision. If you want to change your mind later on, of course, there's always the ability to change your mind. But B'shas Masamata, you can't change your mind. B'shas Gemardin, before the verdict is officially delivered, you can change your mind. Incredible. So Tashma, Danan Elu Keneged Elu, Achira Echamem Esh, Achira Echad, Achira Echad, Mina Mechayvin Dire Hamazakin. So what happens when a Beis Din is adjudicating a case, assuming we have a split opinion, so what happens? We allow the Beis Din to kind of hash it out until ultimately, again, one of the judges who wants to find guilty switches over to the side of innocence. So therefore we have a majority to declare the defendant innocent. Vem Isa, listing Nami Epcha. But again, I both say, it sounds like from here that the reverse is also possible. That you could have, let's say again, a group where the majority or some chevra is holding that he's innocent, some chevra is holding that he's guilty. Let it Abraisa also say that we allow them to debate it until the guilties have the majority. Tana azochos mahader. Achov lo makam mahader. No, because the Tana is looking for an innocent outcome, not for a guilty outcome. Tashma, Tana Rabbi Yosef Chanina, Echa min ha-talmidim shezicha umei. So this is very interesting. So let's say one of the talmidim, one of the members of the court, one of the students who became a member of the court, found grounds to exonerate. And then what happened? He died before the verdict was delivered. Rowan also kilu chayv obim komo. It's fascinating. We view him as if he's still alive since he was part of the deliberations, and therefore we count his opinion as an innocent opinion. But 1 second, we just said before, you can change his mind. So maybe even if he was alive, he would have changed his mind. True, he could have changed his mind, but right now he didn't. The Gemara says, "Vaha shalchu mitam l'div Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina motzim michlau Rabbeinu." But they said, right, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, you are not excluding yourself from the teachings of our teacher. To which the Gemara says, "Ein motzei etmar." No, it means he's not excluding himself. All right, so we'll say, Tashma. We're not finished. So we're trying to figure it out over here. Remember, it's all based on the premise of Rav. So the Mishnah indicated to us that in a capital case, once there's been expressed an opinion for exoneration, you can't switch over to guilty. So Rav comes along and says that is only during the time of deliberations. Deliberations, you got to stick with a team. But during verdict, or when we say during verdict, we'll say, what do you mean during verdict? Before the actual verdict is delivered, but when they are ready to deliver a verdict, at that point, you can switch teams. Tashma, let's analyze. So we'll say, listen to this. As the court was recording their opinions, there were two scribes who were there. Why two scribes? One on the right, one on the left. The kosvin divrei hamazik hamazakin v'divrei hamachayvin, and the scribes would record again the words of the judges who wanted to find guilty and the words of the judges who wanted to exonerate. So let's analyze this. So I understand why we have to record the words of the one who want to find innocent. Right, halalas din. So we'll say, so now listen to this, because again, we want to record the opinions of the one who want to implicate. Why? Because the truth is that Emeretz Hashem tomorrow, right? They're going to sleep on it, and they're going to want to review their decision, and perhaps they'll be able to see a reason to exonerate. But why do we have to record the opinion of the ones who want to find him innocent? All we need is what? Is a quick tally. I don't need to record their logic, because again, I will say why. The Gemara says, I'm sorry, my taima, la mishum di chazu taima achrina lechova, lo mashkechina bahu. Is that not because that even if they find a reason to implicate, will point to their recorded opinions and not allow them to reverse their opinion in favor of implication? What do you see from here? That halacha l'maisa, once members of the Beis find reasons to exonerate, they cannot change their opinion. To which the Gemara says, "Lo kadesh lo yomru shnayim tam echa mishnei mikros." Okay, so now we're being introduced to something else. Now the Gemara says, "No, there's a different reason, because even the judges who exonerate, suppose we're going to see two judges can't espouse the same halachic concept from two different psukim." Now, what does this mean? You want to say the Gemara here is operating with the principle that the Ribono Shel Olam only says things once, right? Every parent has that moment where they say to their kids, "Listen well, I'm going to say this once," right? So the Ribono Shel Olam says things once. But there seem to be multiple psukim in the Torah that reiterate things. Remember, the way we operate is every time there is an reiteration is for why? Davar shenis chadesh ba. There's always some new piece of information. Now, because of that, if you have two dayanim who go ahead and learn out the same exact halachic concept from two different sources, there's a problem. Someone is mistaken. So the Gemara says, so therefore, why do we record? We'll get into this in just a moment. Why do we record the opinions, even of the judges who want to exonerate in writing? Because in the event that they find grounds for exoneration, the same grounds, from two different psukim, there's something flawed in their logic. Listen to this. If two judges said the same concept, ultimately again, from two different sources. So again, they're saying the same exact thing from two different sources. So what's that? Amar lei ein monin lahen ela echad. So I'll say ultimately again, we only count them as one opinion. Now if you look at Rashi for just a moment, it's three lines up before the lines get wide. Ein monin lahen ela echad. Dechad mehanach krai lav lahachi asa. Because remember again, there's no such thing, it's very important, as two psukim espousing the same thing. So therefore, again, if you have two rabbinic opinions espousing the same exact opinion, and they're quoting two different psukim, one of them is wrong. Two psukim cannot be saying the same exact thing. Rashi finishes up the kaim balad lo nichtavu shnei mikros l'tam echad, because you have a concept that two psukim cannot teach the same thing. Therefore, hilcha chad minau mitad tai. One of them is mistaken. So the Gemara says, listen to this. So the Gemara says, Amar le ein toin lahen ela echad. So therefore, again, if you have two judges espousing the same opinion, quoting two different psukim, we count them only as one opinion because ultimately one of them is mistaken. So from Amar Abai Amar Kra Achas Dvar Elokim Shtayim Zu Shamati Ki Oz Lelokim. So the Gemara here quotes the pasuk from Tehillim. Achas dibra Elokim shtayim shamati. This is interesting, right? Shtayim zu shamati. One thing HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I heard, but two different things I heard. Ki oz Elokim, strength is to God. So what does this mean? Listen to this. Mikra echad yotz lekamatamin. One pasuk can be interpreted multiple ways. So right, in other words, just to be clear, obviously all of Gemara is based on multiple different interpretations of the same pasuk. Right? So one pasuk can be interpreted different ways. Ve'ein tam echad yotzei kam mikros. But you can't have the same concept coming from multiple psukim. Dibei Rabbi Shmuel Tana ukipatesh yifutzatz sela. So say Torah is like a hammer that strikes against the stone. Ma patish zem mischalik lekam nitzotzos. Just like when you hit a stone against a hammer against the stone, it's going to shatter into multiple pieces. Af mikra echad yotzei lekam tamim. So too, one pasuk can be interpreted multiple ways. But again, It's multiple ways. Hechidami, what's the case? Hechidami tam echad mishem mikros. Give me an example of one pasuk, or excuse me, of two psukim being interpreted in the same exact way. Rav Zvid Kidisnan. Here's a good example of this. Mizbeach mekadesh es haroilo. We have a concept that the mizbeach ultimately sanctifies anything that is fit to come on the mizbeach. And Abba said, well, we're going to see what that means is, if you accidentally put something that is puzzle, right, on the Mizbeach, you don't take it down. Right? The Mizbeach essentially is Mekadesh. There's no such thing we're going to see as, again, even saying that should not have been put, I don't mean like a chasson, like a non-kosher animal, but again, anything that technically speaking could have gone to the Mizbeach, but had some disqualification associated with it, therefore shouldn't have been put there. But it was put there, doesn't come down. So Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Kalarai Leishim, Yeshua says anything that is fit for the fires, right? But let's say it was disqualified for some reason, but you ended up putting it on the mizbeach, you don't take it down. Ha'ola al mukda. Ha'ola al mukda. Ma'ola shiru'i li'ishim, just like an ola is fit for the fires, the sacrificial fires. Im also lo tered, and even if the ola for some reason was disqualified, right? The ola was disqualified. If once you put it on the mizbeach, you do not take it down. Af kol shiru'i li'ishim im ala lo yara. So to anything else that was fit for the sacrificial fire, but for some reason was disqualified, we don't take it down. Rabbi Gamliel says, kol roi le mizbeach, anything fit for the mizbeach, im ala lo yarad. If ultimately, again, it went up on the Mizbeach, it does not come down. Shne'emar, hiya ola al mukda al Mizbeach. Ma'ola shiru'i legabi Mizbeach, im also lo tered. Af kol shiru'i le Mizbeach, im ala lo yered. Fine. So where it says, I v'tarvayu, my karma karvu. So we'll say, and what are we talking about? What's being offered on the Mizbeach that's not supposed to come down? Psulin. So we'll say, what are we talking about over here? And it's fasting halacha. That if you go ahead and you put something that is puzzle on the Mizbeach, it should not have been put there. Once you put it there, don't take it down. Don't take it down. So the Gemara says, Mar ma'aseh mimkora, or Mar ma'aseh mimizbeach. Supposedly, interestingly enough, halacha l'maisa, they're both espousing the same idea from two different psukim. The Gemara says, "I v'ha'asam miflag pligi diktani seifa ein bein divrei b'gamliel divrei b'shua ela hadam v'anasachim." But it's not true. They're not saying the same thing. The Gemara says there's a distinction. What's the distinction? Blood and wine. Blood and wine libation. Rabbi Gamliel Omer lo yerdu. Rabbi Gamliel says even blood that was erroneously placed there, or wine libations that were erroneously placed there, should not be taken down. Rabbi Shmuel says they should. Rabbi Yoshua says they should be taken down. So they're not saying the same thing. So we'll say, what we're trying to figure out, we're just trying to find an example of this concept, right? The Gemara introduced us to this brand new concept, which the truth is we never knew before, which is that if you have two opinions espousing the same concept, but learning it out from two different psukim, then what? Someone's wrong. Which I will say, by the way, is also a tremendous yesod. That in life, not everyone's right. You know, kind of like we live a little bit like, especially societally, with this idea that everyone is entitled to an opinion and everyone is right. Now, the truth is, everyone is entitled to an opinion, of course. But again, not everyone is right. And this is an incredibly important yesod, because if everyone's right, then there's no MS. Some people have to be right, some people have to be wrong. That is the only way. So where does that concept come from? It comes from here. If you have two people saying the same thing from two different sources, someone's wrong. It can't be that the Torah is saying the same thing in two different contexts. We're trying to figure out an illustration of this. So the Gemara says like this: Ella Amra Papa, last line. Kidisanya. Rabbi Yosef Galili says, Mitoch Shene'amar. Rabbi say Amud Beis. I'm waiting for our break in Sanhedrin. I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow's good. All right. So the Gemara says like this. The Gemara says like this: Ella Amra Papa Kidisanya. Rabbi Yosef Galili Mitoch Shene'amar. Kol Hanogeva v'mizbeach yikdash. Anything I will say. Now again, once again, this is talking about invalid sacrificial items. If invalid sacrificial items are put on the Mizbeach Yikdash, ultimately, again, it is consecrated. It's consecrated. Shomea ani bein she'ein roi. Supposed to say, what does that mean? That means items that are fit for the Mizbeach and not fit for the Mizbeach. Now Rashi points out there something very interesting. For example, what about Sa'ar Udvash? right? Honey and leaven. Now, in general, again, those items are never offered up on the Mizbeach. I would have thought that even if you accidentally put those items on the Mizbeach, you don't have to take it down. Talmud lomar kvasim. Therefore, the pasuk says sheep. Ma kvasim ru'uyin af kol roi. So it says it's very important. So in other words, there is a principle, and this principle says that if you put something on the Mizbeach that should not have been put there, what does that mean? You have a blemished animal. Right? Or for example, sacrificial meat that something happened with it. You shouldn't put it on Mizbeach. But you don't take it down. But that's only something that was technically fit for the Mizbeach. If you put something that was never fit, invalid, for example, honey. Let's say there's no honey that is ever part of any carbon, of any sacrificial rite. So if you accidentally put honey on the Mizbeach, that automatically comes down. Rabbi Akiva says, Ola. We learned this from Ola. Ma Ola ru'uya af kol haroi. So just like Ola is fit for the Mizbeach, so to say anything that is technically fit for the Mizbeach, but invalidated for some reason, if you went ahead and you put it on, you don't take it off. So the Gemara says, V'tarvaihu mai kamematu, and both of these opinions, what are they excluding? So the Gemara says, Psule. They're going ahead and excluding items that are inherently invalid for the Mizbeach. So Mar Ma'asila Mikvasim, Umar Ma'asila Me'ola. One is learning it out from Kvasim, one is learning from Ola. So we'll say, here's the example. Two opinions learning the same concept from two different psukim, or from two different parts of the same pasuk. Two different psukim. So the Gemara says, in this case, two different psukim. No, there is an afkamina. What's an afkamina? We'll say if you accidentally put an invalid bird offering on the Mizbeach. So the Gemara says, Man de ma'asile mikvasim. So the one who learns out from kvasim in aval ola sa'of lo. It's only things like kvasim, actual animal sacrifices, that if you put an invalid one on the Mizbeach, don't take it down. But if you put an invalid oaf on that Mizbeach, then what? Take it down. And the one who said Ola, even Ola Sa'of, if you accidentally put an invalid Ola Sa'of on the Mizbeach, don't take it down. So we'll say, so once again, they're not really saying the same thing. Rashi says as follows: Dam yechashev leishahu, dam shafach, lerabos es hazorek divrei Rabbi Shmuel. So we'll say, listen to this. So totally different discussion, not different discussion, different example. This is talking about also over here of shchutei chutz. Shchutei chutz. So what shchutei chutz? The halacha is you are not allowed to offer a carbon outside of Beis Hamikdash, and if you do, that's called shchutei chutz. That's called offering something outside of the Kavaz Beis Hamikdash. That's liable to death. Liable to death. So listen to this. So dam yichashev leishahu. There's literally again capital liability for a person who does this. Dam shafach. So I'll say l'rabos es hazorek. This comes to include not only someone who offers a karban, but even someone who does zrika, right? The offering of the sprinkling of sacrificial blood. The Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva says, O zevach. What does it mean, O zevach? L'rabos es hazorek. That also comes to include someone who sprinkles blood. So we'll say, what do you see over here? What are they doing? What's happening over here? Two opinions saying the same thing from two different sources. V'tarvayu my kamarbu. What are they both coming to include in the category of shchutei chutz? So zrika mar ma'asile medam yichashev umar ma'asile me'o zevach. So we'll say, so again, again, this seems to be an example of two opinions learning the same thing from two different phrases. So Rabbi Avo says, no, there's an afkamina. What's an afkamina? Shachat v'zarak. If you did shchita and zrika outside. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel eno chayv ala achas. Listen to this. According to Rabbi Shmuel, only chayv. Suppose this is interesting. Let's say a person did shchita and zrika on a carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So listen to this. According to Rabbi Shmuel, you only chayiv once. According to Rabbi Akiva, chayiv shtaim. So you see, they're not saying the same thing. No, according to Rabbi Akiva, you also only chayiv once. To Amar Kra, sham ta'ala olasecha, v'sham ta'ala arvinu rachmana l'kulu asiyo. So we'll say the Torah includes essentially kind of lumps all sacrificial activity that happens outside of the Beis Hamikdash into one category. And therefore, halacha l'maaseh, even Rabbi Akiva would agree that if you were to shecht if you were to shecht and do zrika outside of the Beis Hamikdash, one would be chayiv only once for that. So we'll say, so halacha l'maisa, what comes out of here is as follows. First of all, there's this interesting concept that again, if you have two opinions, learning the same concept from two different psukim, someone is wrong. And I both say, so again, why is this important for us? Because in a Beis Din, if you have two dayanim, offering an opinion, right? They're both offering, by the way, this is true whether they're both implicating or exonerating, and they're both espousing an opinion, and they're basing the same exact concept on two different psukim. The halacha is, they're only counted as one opinion. Someone is wrong in their analysis, and therefore, again, we don't know who's wrong necessarily, but they are only accounted collectively, ultimately, as one opinion. Incredible. All right, let's go back. There's a lot to do. Second wide line. So Dinei Mamanis Tanamayom. So we'll say, so now we're going to get into more logistics. So what's halacha? So Dinei Mamanis, you could go ahead, you could adjudicate a case by day, and you could even go ahead and finish it at night. Dinei Nefashas are judged by day, and they have to be finished by day. Right? You cannot conclude a capital case at night. Okay, fine. Furthermore, again, the next piece was Dinei Mamanis. We know you could go ahead and adjudicate and conclude a case that same day, but Dinei Nefashos, you can't complete the case, can't deliver the verdict until the next morning. So let's analyze. Says the Gemara. So Dinei Mamanis done by Yom. So from where do I know that? From where do you know that Dinei Mamanis is adjudicated by day? And also, by the way, it's adjudicated by day and can be finished that same day as well. I'm sorry. It could be adjudicated that day, and you could even deliver the verdict at night. This is Dinei Mamanis, right? So monetary law adjudicated by day and could finish the verdict at night. Now, just to be clear, let's do the Gemara. Where do you know this? That you could even conclude at night. The pasuk says you should judge the people at all times. At all times. So you see from here that you could even conclude a judgment at night. If that's the case, then why can't you even begin a court proceeding at night? Right, beginning at night, to which the Gemara says, the Gemara says, the Rava Rami Ksiv, because Rava went ahead and contrasted psukim. Right, Rav Rami Ksiv, v'shavtu asa'am b'chaleis. The pasuk says you shall judge the people at all times, which sounds like what? You should even be able to begin a court proceedings at night. Uksiv, and the pasuk says, "V'haya biyom hanchilo es banav." Then we'll say by inheritance law, the pasuk says that it will be on the day that he bequeaths to his son. So we'll say, which sounds like what? Now, bequeathing, the assumption is this is a state law. So a state law is going to be done when? By day. So what's going on over here? So we'll say, so all this is monetary law. So could monetary law be done at night or not? Haketzad, here we go. Yom letchilas din. So what we learn is a case can only be initiated by day, but laila ligmar din. So I'll say this is how we reconcile the two psukim. So you can only initiate a court proceedings by day, but you are allowed to complete it and finish it even at night. To which the Gemara says, Masnisin delo Rabbi Meir. Our Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Meir. The Sanya, Rabbi Meir said, Desanya Hayra Meir Omer Matamud Lomar Al PM Yiyek Kol Riv V'Chol Nega. So the pasuk says, based on the Beis Din, right? Based on the Beis Din, will be adjudicated any Riv and any Nega. Now we'll say now, what does Nega refer to? B'Pashtus Nega refers to Tzaras. So the Gemara says, V'Chima Inyan Rivim Eitzel Negoim. We'll say Rivim refers to just conflicts, right? Beis Din will resolve conflicts. So why is Negoim? Why is Saras brought up over here in the context of Rivim? Elamakish Rivim Negoim. Rather, the Torah is coming to compare, right? Conflict resolution, or conflicts. Tenegoim, manigoim bayom. We'll say just like tzaras, right? Tzaras can only be examined, can only be seen by the Kohen by day. Dichsev obiyom hera ospo, afrivim bayom. So to again the adjudication of court cases of conflicts can only be done by day. Umanigoim shelo besumin is very interesting. And just like I will say, again, you cannot deal, right? A person who is blind cannot rule on Nigoim, Tichsiv l'chol mara eni hakoin, af rivim shelo besumin. Rabbi say this is fascinating. Halacha l'maisa, judges can't be blind. Isn't that fascinating, right? You cannot have a blind judge. Now this is based on the comparison between rivim, adjudication of cases, and Nigoim, saras. Obviously the Kohen needs to have sight. So just like the Kohen has to have sight, the judges have to have sight as well. You'll say, which by the way is fascinating. You'll say to yourself, why? They could just ingest the information? No, because the truth is, in judgment, seeing the way people act, seeing the way people present, seeing the way people react to information being said for them, against them, is incredibly important in the process as well. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, furthermore, again, we also compare Nigaim to Rivim. Just like the adjudication of cases, you can't have judges who are relatives. This is interesting. So apparently, by tzaras, you can't go to a Kohen who is related to you. Which also makes sense. If that's the case, but then we should say, just like a Beis Din by Rivim has to be comprised of 3 people, so maybe Tzaras also has to be seen by 3 people. V'dinhu, Mamono b'shlosha gufo kol shekein. If monetary cases have to be adjudicated by a Beis Din of 3, certainly cases involving your physical body should require a Beis Din of 3. Tamalomar v'huva el aron hakohen o el echad mibanov halamanata shafilu kohen echad roas hanegoyim. We'll say no. So that's where the comparison stops, because by negoyim by Tzaras it's quite explicit. The Torah says you shall be brought to Aaron a Kohen, which indicates to us you need a Kohen, and how many of them do you need? Only one, in order to rule on Sarah's cases. Incredible. So Gemara tells a story. There was a blind man who lived in Rabbi Yochanan's neighborhood, right? And he adjudicated cases, he acted as a judge, and Rabbi Yochanan never said anything. Rabbi said, we just said before, that's what? A blind person can't serve as a judge. So the Gemara says, how is he able to do this on Rabbi Yochanan? Halacha ki stam mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan says, that halacha is like a stam mishnah. And what does the mishnah say? Utanan, kala kasher ladun, kasher lahayid. Whoever is fit to give judgment is fit to give testimony. V'yesh shekasher lahayid ve'in kasher ladun. Now, by the way, so I'll say, so this works in one direction. Whoever is fit to be a judge is always fit to be a witness. But whoever is fit to be a witness is not necessarily always fit to be a judge. But the idea was what we just said before, that Allah a blind person can't be a judge. So what's going on? So how is Rabbi Yochanan allowing this guy to operate in his neighborhood without saying anything? But Rabbi Yochanan says, La suye suma ba'achas me'inav. So it's interesting, Rabbi Yochanan himself said, this comes to include even someone who is blind in one eye. That even someone who is blind in one eye is not allowed to be a judge. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Rabbi Yochanan stamach risi ashkach. Rabbi Yochanan has another stam mishnah. What was the other stam mishnah? So the Gemara says, Dinei mamanes danin bayom v'gorim b'alayla. Monetary law, you could begin the case by day and finish it at night. So the Gemara says, you can finish danin bayom v'gorim b'alayla. You can finish it at night. So as I say, interestingly enough, so I say, you know what actually we'll do is we'll stop over here. No, let's go. So I'll say ultimately again, why is this stam mishnah? Why is this one stronger than the other one? So says, so first of all, again, this second stam is stated more in the rabbim. Ultimately, again, furthermore, again, this second stam mishnah is halacha l'maisa quoted in the context of other court-related laws. So because of that, we'll say, if you take a look at Rashi says there is stomach. So we'll say, so now how does this second, let's just end with this, how does this second brisa support blind judges? Because we'll say the assumption is like this: if you could adjudicate or conclude a case at night everyone is considered to be vision impaired. So since you're allowed to deliver a verdict at night, therefore what? Therefore, Allah L'maisa, Rabbi Yochanan posits that even a blind judge is fit to adjudicate the case. Right? So stop over here. Again, we'll get resolution on that, because that's actually quite a fascinating halacha. We'll get resolution on that tomorrow. We'll say, tremendous shkoyach. All right, Chavran Zoom, have a great day, everyone. Good to see everyone. Saras Tavos.